You think mental toughness is something you wake up with one day, that it magically appears when life gets hard. That belief is why you're weak. That belief is why pressure breaks you. Mental toughness isn't a gift. It's a scar. It's built slowly, painfully, over time, while you're tired, doubting yourself, and still showing up. If that offends you, good. Comfort is for losers. You've been lied to. You were told confidence comes first, then action follows. Wrong. Action comes first, and confidence is dragged out of it kicking and screaming. Every soft man waits to feel ready. Strong men move while feeling nothing but resistance. That's the first uncomfortable truth you need to swallow. Mental toughness is developed the same way a callus forms, repeated friction in the same place. Pressure, stress, responsibility. You don't become hard by avoiding pain. You become hard by letting pain hit you every day and refusing to flinch. Time under load is the only currency that buys strength. No shortcuts, no hacks, no inspirational quotes. Now let's talk about something most people misunderstand: speaking in tongues. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about control. Your mind has a language. Weak men let it speak chaos, fear, excuses, doubt. Strong men reprogram that language. They force their inner voice to speak obedience, precision, command. When your internal dialogue stops begging and starts ordering, you've crossed a line most men never even see. This is identity shift. You don't motivate yourself anymore. You give orders. You don't ask if you feel like training, working, or pushing forward. You execute. That's speaking in tongues at a high level. Your mind no longer speaks comfort. It speaks dominance. You've trained it through repetition until it obeys automatically. Discipline is the translator. Discipline turns thought into action without negotiation. Every time you do the hard thing when it's inconvenient, you reinforce a new identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who finishes. Over time, this compounds. The man you become would embarrass the man you used to be. Most people never get here because they quit too early. They want results before identity changes. They want respect before earning it. But mental toughness is a long game. It's built in silence while no one is watching. That's why it scares people. It demands patience, suffering, and consistency, 3 things weak men run from. Mental toughness is not something you are born with, and it is not a label you earn by talking tough or acting confident when life is easy. It is the direct result of repeated pressure applied over time. If pressure has not tested you, then whatever strength you think you have is imaginary. Comfort hides weakness. Pressure exposes reality. This is where most men get exposed because they mistake a calm environment for personal strength. When life is smooth, everyone feels capable. When resistance appears, most collapse. That collapse doesn't mean you are broken. It means you were never forged. Pressure is the training ground. Every demanding responsibility, every uncomfortable situation, every moment where quitting feels logical is doing one thing: testing whether you have substance or just opinions. Men who avoid pressure don't stay safe, they stay fragile. The body and mind adapt only to stress. Without it, there is no growth, no resilience, no edge. You don't build toughness by thinking about hard work. You build it by being under load, so often that pressure stops feeling special. The uncomfortable truth is this: pain is the process. There is no alternate route. Mental toughness is developed the same way physical strength is built, through resistance that strains you just enough to force adaptation. One hard day doesn't make you tough. 100 hard days stacked together do. Each time you endure discomfort without escaping, something shifts. Your tolerance expands. What once felt unbearable becomes normal. What once broke you becomes routine. That is how strength compounds. Most people misunderstand this and think suffering alone makes them strong. It doesn't. Random pain creates damage, not toughness. Controlled pressure creates power. Choosing difficulty on purpose, showing up when it's inconvenient, staying disciplined when no reward is visible. This is the difference. Tough men are not victims of hardship. They are architects of it. They design their days to include resistance because they understand what it produces. There's a brutal reality that weak men refuse to accept. If your life has been easy, your confidence is fake. It hasn't been tested yet. The first real storm will expose it. This is why pressure is valuable. It strips away illusions. It shows you exactly where you stand. And once you see the truth, you have 2 options: escape and remain fragile, or stay in the fire long enough to change. Over time, repeated pressure does something deeper than just building tolerance. It rewires identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes they can handle things and start seeing yourself as someone who has handled worse. That internal shift is everything. You walk differently. You think differently. You no longer panic when stress shows up because stress has become familiar territory. Familiarity kills fear. This is why time matters. Toughness cannot be rushed. Every attempt to shortcut the process creates weakness, not strength. Men who chase instant confidence avoid the very experiences that would earn it. They want the mindset without the scars. But scars are the proof. They are the evidence that you stayed when leaving was easier. Pressure over time creates a quiet certainty, not loud arrogance, not performative confidence. Something colder, heavier, more stable. You stop reacting emotionally to obstacles. You respond with execution. That's when mental toughness becomes visible, not in words, but in behavior. When things go wrong and you don't flinch, people feel it. They sense the weight behind you. If you want real mental toughness, stop asking how to feel strong and start asking how much pressure you can carry today without breaking. Then do it again tomorrow. And the next day. That is the only formula that has ever worked. Everything else is fantasy. Most men destroy their own potential by waiting for a feeling that never arrives. They tell themselves they'll move when they feel confident, when motivation shows up, when the fear fades. That moment is a myth. It does not exist. Confidence is not the entry fee for action. It is the receipt you get after action has already been taken. The men who understand this early separate themselves from the rest before the race even begins. Action is uncomfortable by design. If it felt good at the start, everyone would do it. The hesitation you feel is not a signal to stop. It's proof you're standing at the edge of growth. Weak men interpret resistance as danger. Strong men interpret it as direction. They move toward it, not away from it. Every time you act while doubt is present, you weaken doubt's authority over you. The lie you've been sold is that readiness comes before execution. In reality, execution creates readiness. The first time you do anything meaningful, you will do it badly. You will feel exposed. You will question yourself. That is not failure. That is initiation. Skill, confidence, and certainty are all byproducts of repetition, not prerequisites. Waiting to feel capable guarantees you never become capable. Fear thrives in inaction. When you stand still, your mind fills the space with imagined outcomes, worst-case scenarios, and self-doubt. The moment you move, fear loses oxygen. Action collapses uncertainty into reality. Even if the result isn't perfect, clarity replaces speculation. Clarity builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. This sequence is non-negotiable. Men who act without emotional permission develop a different relationship with themselves. They stop asking for internal approval and start relying on execution. This is where real self-trust is formed, not through positive thinking, but through evidence. Every completed action becomes proof that you can be relied on. Over time, this proof stacks. You don't need to hype yourself up anymore because your history speaks for you. The disciplined man does not wait for alignment between emotion and obligation. He moves despite misalignment. He understands that feelings are temporary and unreliable, while standards are permanent. By acting under resistance, he trains his nervous system to remain functional under pressure. This is not about bravery, it is about conditioning. The more often you act while uncomfortable, the less power discomfort has over you. Most people never experience this shift because they live emotionally first. They ask, "How do I feel?" before asking, "What must be done?" This inversion keeps them stuck. High-level men reverse it. They do what must be done first and let their emotions catch up later. Eventually, emotions follow action automatically. Confidence stops being something you chase and becomes something that follows you. There is nothing mystical about this process. It is mechanical. You act, you survive, you adapt. Repeated enough times and hesitation becomes unfamiliar. You stop romanticizing motivation and start respecting consistency. That is when confidence becomes stable instead of fragile. If you want to know whether someone is truly confident, don't listen to how they talk. Watch how quickly they move when things are uncertain. Speed of action under doubt reveals everything. That speed is not personality. It is trained. And it is trained by refusing to wait for feelings that were never required in the first place. Your inner voice decides your ceiling long before the world ever does. Most men never realize this because they assume their thoughts are facts, Their doubts are warnings, and their emotions deserve a vote. That assumption quietly ruins them. The voice in your head is not a guide, it is a system. And like any system, it either runs you or you run it. Weak men let their inner voice speak freely. It questions, it complains, it negotiates, it asks permission. Maybe tomorrow. You're tired. You deserve a break. That voice sounds reasonable, even intelligent, which is why it's dangerous. It doesn't scream weakness. It whispers it. And every time you listen, you reinforce a pattern of delay and self-betrayal. Strong men don't silence the inner voice. They discipline it. They change its function. Instead of allowing it to debate, they force it to command. The language shifts from emotion to execution. Not, do I feel like this, but this gets done. That shift alone separates leaders from followers. When your inner voice stops asking questions and starts giving orders, clarity replaces chaos. This is not positive thinking. It's authority. Your mind responds to structure the same way your body responds to training. If you let it wander, it weakens. If you impose standards, it sharpens. Every time you override hesitation with instruction, you teach your brain who's in charge. Over time, resistance fades because resistance has been ignored too many times to matter. Most men think discipline is about forcing the body. It's not. It's about commanding the mind. The body will follow whatever voice is dominant. If the dominant voice is emotional, you get inconsistency. If the dominant voice is decisive, you get results. That voice is built, not discovered. And it's built through repetition under discomfort. There will be moments when your mind tells you to stop, to slow down, to avoid pressure. Those messages are not evil, they are biological defaults. The problem is obedience. High-level men hear the message and proceed anyway. They don't argue. They don't justify. They issue a counter, command, and move. That moment of override is where control is trained. Over time, something changes. The inner voice stops panicking. It stops dramatizing. It learns the pattern. It understands that excuses are ignored and commands are enforced. Eventually, discipline becomes automatic. You don't need motivation because the system is already set. You act first, think later, and feel last. This creates a dangerous advantage. When chaos hits, your mind doesn't spiral like everyone else's. It defaults to execution. While others are overwhelmed by internal noise, you experience silence and focus. That silence is not emptiness. It's dominance. It's the absence of unnecessary dialogue. Men who never train this remain prisoners of their own thoughts. They are intelligent, capable, and endlessly stuck. They consume information, analyze options, and wait for certainty. Meanwhile, men with simpler but more controlled inner dialogue pass them by. Control beats intelligence every time. When your inner voice speaks and commands, identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. You trust yourself because you have evidence. That trust is unshakable because it's based on behavior, not belief. The world responds differently to men who are internally aligned. There is no hesitation in their tone, no confusion in their actions. People sense it immediately. It's not charisma. It's internal order made visible. And it starts with one decision repeated daily. Your mind does not get a vote. It gets instructions. Most men worship motivation because it feels powerful, but motivation is unreliable, emotional, and short-lived. It shows up when conditions are comfortable and disappears the moment effort becomes inconvenient. Discipline, on the other hand, does not care about mood, confidence, or energy. It operates regardless. That is why discipline is power. It is the only force that produces results consistently, even when everything in you wants to stop. Motivation is reactive. It depends on excitement, praise, or visible progress. The moment those disappear, so does the drive. Men who rely on motivation live in cycles of intensity and collapse. They start strong, talk big, and fade quietly. Discipline breaks that cycle by removing emotion from decision-making. When discipline is in place, action becomes non-negotiable. You do not act because you feel good. You act because it is required. This is where most people get uncomfortable. Discipline feels cold. It feels restrictive. It feels unforgiving. That's exactly why it works. Discipline does not negotiate with excuses. It does not listen to fatigue or fear. It enforces standards whether the day is good or bad. Men who adopt discipline stop being victims of their internal state. They become operators instead of reactors. Emotions lie. They exaggerate discomfort and minimize long-term consequences. In the moment, skipping work feels harmless. Quitting early feels justified. Rest feels earned even when it isn't. Discipline cuts through that distortion. It is logic applied through action. It protects you from your weakest impulses and aligns your behavior with your long-term objectives. Discipline also builds credibility with yourself. Every time you follow through, despite resistance, you strengthen internal trust. You stop doubting your ability to show up. That self-trust is rare and extremely powerful. Men without it constantly second-guess themselves. Men with it move decisively because they know they will execute regardless of how they feel. Over time, discipline reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs external stimulation to perform. You become someone who functions under pressure. This shift changes everything. Stress becomes manageable. Boredom loses control. You stop needing external validation because your standard is internal and enforced daily. The disciplined man does not chase comfort. He respects order. He understands that freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is being able to do what must be done without internal resistance. That kind of freedom is earned, not granted. And it is earned through repeated acts of discipline when no one is watching. Most people avoid discipline because it exposes their lack of structure. It forces them to confront how inconsistent they've been. That confrontation is uncomfortable, so they distract themselves with motivation, inspiration, and excuses. But none of that produces leverage. Discipline does. When discipline is established, results stop being accidental. Progress becomes predictable. You don't hope things work out. You make them work. That reliability is what separates men who talk about potential from men who embody it. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. Motivation makes you feel good. Discipline makes you effective. One is emotional. The other is functional. If you want control over your life, your time, and your outcomes, discipline is the only system that will never betray you. Most men believe identity is something you discover by thinking, reflecting, or talking about who you want to become. That belief keeps them trapped in imagination. Identity is not formed in the mind first. It is forged through behavior. Who you are is not defined by intention, desire, or self-image. It is defined by what you repeatedly do, especially when doing it is uncomfortable. Every action you take casts a vote, not for who you wish you were, but for who you actually are. When your actions are inconsistent, your identity becomes unstable. You doubt yourself because you've given yourself reasons to doubt. When actions are aligned and repeated, identity hardens. You stop questioning who you are because your behavior answers the question for you. This is why thinking your way into a new identity never works. Thought without execution creates fantasy. You can tell yourself you are disciplined, focused, or strong, but the body and mind do not accept claims without proof. Proof is provided only by behavior under pressure. The moment you act against resistance, identity begins to shift, quietly, permanently. Most men wait for identity to change before acting differently. They tell themselves, once I become more confident, I'll show up. Once I feel like a disciplined person, I'll commit. That logic is backward. Behavior comes first. Identity follows. Confidence, discipline, and strength are not feelings you wait for. They are labels assigned after repeated evidence. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. It observes what you do and adjusts your self-concept accordingly. If you consistently avoid difficulty, your brain concludes you are someone who avoids difficulty. If you consistently engage with discomfort, it concludes you are someone who handles pressure. This process is automatic. You do not think your way into it. You behave your way into it. This is also why inconsistency is so damaging. 1 week of effort followed by 2 weeks of excuses teaches the wrong lesson. It trains your mind to expect collapse. Over time, you start identifying as someone who starts but doesn't finish. That identity becomes heavy, not because you were born that way, but because you practiced it. When behavior changes consistently, something powerful happens. Internal dialogue changes without effort. You stop arguing with yourself because there is no contradiction. Your actions and self-image align. This alignment creates a calm certainty. You no longer need external validation because your behavior confirms who you are. High-level men understand this and use it intentionally. They design behaviors that force identity change. They commit to standards they must meet daily, not because it feels good, but because it reshapes who they become. They know that the fastest way to become a different man is to act like that man before it feels natural. This process takes time, and that's why most people fail. Identity does not flip overnight. It accumulates. Each action adds weight. Each excuse removes it. Over months and years, the difference becomes extreme. One man becomes solid, reliable, grounded. Another remains uncertain, reactive, and easily shaken. Once identity shifts, discipline becomes easier. Not because tasks are easier, but because resistance is lower. You are no longer forcing yourself to act against who you are. You are acting in alignment with it. That alignment is strength. It makes performance repeatable instead of exhausting. If you want to know who you are becoming, don't listen to your thoughts. Watch your behavior. It tells the truth every time. Most men quit long before time has any chance to work in their favor. They misjudge the process and assume that if results are not immediate, the effort is pointless. This impatience keeps them average. Time is not neutral. It either compounds your actions or exposes your inconsistency. Men who understand this stop chasing quick wins and start building endurance, knowing that quiet persistence creates advantages that cannot be faked. Endurance is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is built-in repetition that looks unimpressive from the outside. Showing up when there is no excitement, no praise, and no visible progress feels pointless to most people. That feeling is exactly what filters them out. Only men who can tolerate the boredom of consistency stay long enough for results to accumulate. Quitting early feels harmless in the moment. It feels like self-protection. But every early exit teaches your mind a dangerous lesson that discomfort is a signal to stop. Over time, this lesson compounds into fragility. The man who leaves early never builds trust with himself. He becomes dependent on motivation, circumstances, and reassurance. Time never rewards him because he never stays. Men who endure quietly develop a different relationship with effort. They stop expecting validation. They stop performing for attention. Their work becomes internal and controlled. This is where real strength forms, not in intensity, but in longevity. Anyone can be intense for a week. Very few can be consistent for years. Time magnifies behavior. Small daily actions seem insignificant, but they stack relentlessly. One extra hour of work, one repeated discipline, one avoided excuse, multiplied over months, separates men into entirely different categories. The gap between those who endure and those who quit becomes impossible to bridge later. That gap is built slowly, then revealed suddenly. Most people underestimate this because they measure progress emotionally. If they don't feel different, they assume nothing is changing. In reality, the most important changes are invisible at first. Mental toughness, confidence, and authority develop beneath the surface. By the time they become visible, they are already permanent. Endurance also builds immunity to external chaos. When you have stayed consistent through boredom, fatigue, and uncertainty, external pressure loses its shock value. You have already trained under worse conditions. This creates calm under stress. While others panic and react, you continue executing because execution has become normal. Men who endure long enough stop competing with others. They compete with time. They understand that if they stay in the game while others drop out, they win by default. This is not arrogance. It is arithmetic. Fewer competitors remain as time passes. Persistence narrows the field. The dangerous part is that endurance does not feel heroic. It feels repetitive. It feels lonely. It feels thankless. That is why it works. It selects for men who can operate without emotional reward. Those men become reliable, stable, and dangerous in the best sense of the word. Time eventually exposes everyone. It exposes those who relied on excitement and those who relied on structure. It rewards men who endured quietly and punishes those who chased quick relief. When the results finally surface, they look sudden to outsiders. In reality, they are the delayed outcome of staying when leaving was easier. If you want to separate yourself permanently, don't look for intensity. Look for duration. Stay longer than your excuses. Stay longer than your doubt. Stay long enough that quitting no longer feels like an option. Here's the final truth. Time is going to pass anyway. You can spend it building a mind that dominates pressure, or you can spend it making excuses and hoping life gets easier. It won't. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards hardened men who can endure without breaking. Mental toughness isn't developed in a moment. It's forged daily, over years, through discipline and controlled suffering. If you're willing to pay that price, you'll stand above the noise. If you're not, step aside and stop pretending you want power.